Hello, and welcome back to another week of the Lost Sheep Podcast. My name is Cole Bissett, and I'm joined here today by...
Evan Abear and
Zario Pangallo.
And you might recognize we have a special guest on today, one of our Focus missionaries on campus this year. Thomas, would you like to just introduce yourself to the camera and let the people know who you are and what you do?
How's it going, everybody? My name's Thomas Case. I'm a first-year Focus missionary. I was born in the state of Georgia. I went to the University of Georgia. Go Dogs! And serve here at the University of Alabama. Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah. So we're extremely excited about this episode. We've been kind of anxiously awaiting it and getting approval for Thomas to get on this episode. How long was the process? When did we schedule this originally? Do you remember?
It was funny. We actually talked about it in the fall.
Yeah.
I feel like I forgot about it, so it's on me. And then I emailed about 2 or 3 weeks ago. They're probably busy, so we finally got a response.
Yep.
So we're here.
We're here. We've got it done. We've got it down. I'm not sure if you're feeling this, but when we first started this podcast, I remember when Nazario and I would prep for the episodes, especially like the first 5, we'd be like so nervous about it, just because they were like new to the podcast. How are you like? Are you familiar with the ropes? Are you like settled in? Or are you like coming in a little jittery? Or like where are you at the moment? How can we make you feel comfortable here?
Yeah, it's funny because I watch a lot of podcasts, but it's different being on one. So I'm like, I have no idea what to expect. Y'all have asked me for like 3 basic things, and then other than that, I haven't heard anything.
Have you ever, is this the first podcast you've ever been on?
Yeah, it's the first one I've been on. So
Isn't that such an honor for us?
Yeah,
That's kind of crazy.
So I'm very thankful for the invitation.
That's fun.
This is awesome.
Well,
I feel excited, but
Good.
Well, to loosen up here real quick, we're gonna do some little icebreakers. Just like the basic. How has your week been? I feel like it's kind of weird.
He had something prepped. I thought he was gonna start asking us like hard questions.
No. We'll do our basic routine here. But I was not on the last episode, unfortunately, and so it feels weird to be back in the driver's seat. And not as a listener. It was very strange hearing my name on a podcast that I wasn't even in. And so I was very, very excited to get back on the reins. And I noticed they discussed the 3 transcendentals, which is like my favorite.
Miss ever?
Second. I think I missed one more.
Right.
But
Sure.
the one episode that I wasn't on, they discussed my favorite. Oh, it's the 3rd episode. I missed. Yeah, that's right. It was the one episode that I wasn't on that they discussed my favorite topic about transcendentals. And so in the middle of the episode, I had like an aha moment of how dare they. But it was a great episode. They did a good job. I was glad. And it was really cool. But anyways, boys, how has your week been? You'll notice that Nazario and I are sharing mics. So if we ever transition, just be patient with us. But Evan, would you like to go first?
Good week. I know Nazario and I talked a lot about obviously the Triduum and good night over here, Wrecking Ball. We talked a lot about the Triduum and all that, which that was just fantastic. I had a blast. And I'm sure a lot of mass, but a wonderful time, and it's always worth it. And just Easter was good. Boiled crawfish, had some people over, had a blast. Eastered really well, and now we enter into the octave of the Easter season, and then we get 49 technically days of Easter, and it's wonderful and cool and exciting, and everyone's happy, and all the churches are decked out as fire. Starting the grind towards finals at school, so that's less than exciting. I'm sure you can both relate, but yeah, overall decent week. I'll toss it to you, Nazario. We'll hear your voice for the first time, and
Second time, I said my name for
okay.
about 0.5
So,
seconds, but it's a little weird not being able to just butt in whenever I want with a comment to make Cole feel uncomfortable or, get him thrown off a little bit. But hopefully that helps you, Cole. Anyways, my week was pretty good as well. I actually went down to Destin Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so I got to go to the Veneration of the Cross service on Friday night at Resurrection Catholic Church in Destin, and then technically it's Miramar Beach, but who cares about exact places? But then Sunday, we went to their mass at 9:30 a.m., and we got there 20 minutes early. That was not early enough. The parish was full, so we went to the parish hall. So I felt like a Protestant watching a projector screen of the mass. But they did bring communion over, and then we ran out of communion. They had to go get more people to bring more communion over. So quite an experience.
Who's we?
Oh, I went with my girlfriend and her family. So we were all over there. It's a good time. You look, you're gonna say something.
No, I thought she was also from where you live.
Yes, you're correct. But we they went down there for vacation. And I pulled up.
I wasn't gonna like dox you, but I was like, I also thought that she was from the same place that
Yes,
you're from.
she is
so
from
I'm
Kentucky, just like me.
confused. All right.
So yes, you're
Okay.
all good. You're all good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
but that was my Easter experience, and yeah, we're back at school. Just I got a little bit left. We really don't even have much left. Next week is our last week, technically a full class week, then dead week and finals week. So the last week titled a real week. Okay, it depends what your professor does for dead week. But yeah, not Evan, Thomas. How was your week so far? What was your Easter experience like this weekend? Your first Easter here at Alabama?
Yeah, so it was my first Easter here at Alabama, my third Triduum I've ever participated in.
Awesome.
So that was incredible.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You were a convert in college. Fun fact.
Yes.
Were you baptized at the Easter Triduum on Saturday night, and what was that like? If that was your
I was
experience?
not. I was
Ooh.
actually baptized as an infant. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we could talk about like what that was like. Well, I don't know what it was like, but we could talk about that. You know, I can only imagine, but we could talk about that. But yeah, I
Vivid
wasn't.
memory of
I
that
received confirmation
occasion.
of First Communion. But still, like I love the Easter Vigil. We had I think 20 plus people come into the church on Saturday. I think it's a beautiful testament to people wanting the fullness of the truth. I love the Triduum. I think yeah, it's the most prayerful time of the year. It's very beautiful entering to the different things going on. Yeah, the week's been great. We're here in the octave. Everybody's happy. Everybody's joyful. I mean, the church is packed. People are showing up, so it's a good time.
Yeah, so we always have a fun time with our guests because we tried to figure out the balance between interviewing them but also still talking about the quote that they had. But before we get into that, my week was something. My last week was loaded with exams, and that's why I wasn't on the podcast last week. I remember Nazario
Hearing
texted me.
excuses is what
Yeah.
I'm hearing.
They texted both Nazario and Evan texted me, and they're like, "Can you really not do Tuesday?" And I was like, "I really can't because I studied from Sunday night pretty much until Tuesday, at night, and then after that I took both exams in that time period, and then I went straight into labs, and I studied labs, or I worked on my lab for like a day and a half, and so it was just like I was literally a slave to my study room last week, so that was exciting, but and the nice but about that is I got to finish the week with the Easter Triduum, and it was great. I didn't get to go to the Veneration of the Cross, which is okay, but I did get to experience the Holy Thursday Mass, which was incredible, and Easter Vigil, which was also incredible. Really cool experience. My only thing I was not a big fan of at the Easter Vigil that I went to is that they turn on the lights after we walked in and not at the moment that, where it's like that big glorious moment in the middle of it when Jesus is resurrected. And it's like, it's not as glorious in that sense because it just doesn't feel, the change is not as different, if that makes sense, but it was still a great experience. Loved it. It finished at around like 11:30, so it was 2 hours and 42 minutes, so a legit Easter Vigil. That's how you know it was good. The homily was baller.
Insane pull. So it was 2 hours and 42
yeah,
minutes.
bro. We were like trying to put my family at a competition to see who could get
Shocked.
closest.
I'm
And so,
shocked.
so we were
I'm
like,
shocked.
we're gonna hit it, and so I was off. I said 2 hours and 28
That's called
minutes.
gambling.
But there was no money involved.
I think it's allowed.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I
pretty
appreciate it from the focus
Uh,
missionary
that's
over there in the
personal
corner.
Do not turn
Personal
my
opinion.
father's house
Personal
into a temple for the money changers or whatever they say.
Personal
But, anyways, without further ado, we will go ahead and transition to our quote of the week.
Ladies and gentlemen, the quote of the week.
Okay, so Thomas hit us with this quote, so I'm going to let him actually introduce it real quick.
Yeah, so I actually brought the book. I'll start there. So it's from He Leadeth Me by Father Walter Ciszek, if I'm saying that correctly. If I'm not, sorry about that. But yeah, he says, I had continuously to learn to accept God's will, not as I wished it to be, not as it might have been, but actually as it was at the moment. So this is a book that I read senior year of college, kind of discerning like post-grad and like what's going on in my life. It's as it says on the front, an extraordinary testament of faith. It really kind of broke down for me like God's will in my life and how like it's not such a struggle of something like to be grasped, but something to just accept and like live in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a beautiful quote. I think it sums up some of the things that he went in in the story. So, yeah.
So I think like some of the general and obvious questions is obviously you're a focused missionary and you're a convert. So there has been some pretty drastic changes in your life. And I'm sure God's will has, obviously played a huge part in that. But how has that looked? How have you found that it's best to discern God's will in those decisions? Has it been uncomfortable? Is it something that you had to learn to grow into? And basically, how'd you end up here? Like, how are you a focused missionary now?
Yeah. So,
Tell us your life story.
Yeah, I mean,
in,
it really
10
really
words.
basically what we're asking.
yeah. So, we could talk about conversion here in a second, but really, like, what really started to change, and as like I got into like wanting to be a missionary, was I already came into the church freshman year of college, got involved sophomore year in different like ministry aspects around the Catholic Center, and same thing junior year. I was like, kind of Sunday Catholic, just like going, to mass, doing my thing. And like, I felt like I kind of plateaued. And usually whenever like I notice like I'm plateauing, usually like I'm kind of, taking a step back and I'm not being like aware of like what God's really trying to do in my life. So that kind of changed as like I got into roommates, and like, let me tell you about my roommates in college. So there were 5 of us. Dominic, Ethan, Jackson, Francis, and me. Dominic was a former seminarian before school, and the other 4 of us were all missionaries now. So we lived in a really good house. It was kind of like a furnace of formation. Like, they really kind of pushed me in a lot of different ways. They, kind of challenged me to get involved in a Bible study junior year. I was like probably like the worst participant you could probably have. I like would show up, not really talk, because I'm kind of quiet when I first meet people. So I was really quiet, didn't really talk. I would always like try to drag the conversation because I love to joke around. So any joke that I could throw in there, I'm throwing.
Really? Really?
But yeah, and like I would go and like it was cool. It wasn't until I went to Ciszek in St. Louis because everybody else was going. I was like, I'll do a boys trip to St. Louis, which like is what I thought of it at the time. I met our new missionary, Ben, and he was like, we're going to be friends. And I think through his like personal approach to like being friends and like also being my missionary really kind of changed like like the perception I had of the faith is something not that like I believed in, but also something like I lived out in a very intentional way. So I joined his Bible study spring of junior year, got invited into discipleship. And just kind of got involved there. It kind of is like, I loved it. Like I just kept going. I was like, I feel, fully alive in a sense. Like I'm enjoying what I'm learning. I'm applying it to my life. Like, I'm living a life of joy, which is what the gospel is about. I started leading a Bible study. I love sharing the faith with other guys, especially because like I had a huge conversion in college. I know what it's like. So I love that. Senior year, I'm kind of skipping a lot of stuff. So if y'all have questions, let me know. But yeah, senior year, I was weighing a couple different job offers, Focus being one of them. I was like, I can't discern it if I don't interview. Like it's not like practical discernment. If it's not an option, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I'll go interview. I think post interview, I was like, I'd be a fool to say no to this. I'd be a fool to say no to like what God's putting on my heart. I felt God's very clear. If he doesn't seem clear, it's something internally going on in my heart. I left that weekend pretty convicted of like, I want to say yes to this, and I know I need to. And after, finally committing and staying like true to my promise, and my word that I gave him that, I love what I do. I love what I get to wake up and do, and very blessed, very blessed. So that's kind of how I'm here. Got placed to Alabama in June, so that was pretty fun to figure that out. So.
Yeah, I know from our viewpoint, we're always like, it's always kind of interesting when we get new Focus missionaries because we don't really know who in the world we're going to get. And so it's always like stalking the Bama Catholic like Focus Instagram page. And I remember literally scrolling for like the end of summer. I would like refresh and I was like, today's got to be the day that they just post some sort of teaser or something. And I remember the first picture I saw of you was at y'all's day that they basically find out who goes where, and there was a sign with all you guys. And
Gender
like,
reveal.
Yeah, basically the Focus gender reveal.
This is great. This is great.
And I was like, yo, that's our boy. His name's Thomas. And I called Nazara and I was like, did you see our Focus missionary for the summer? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, he looks cool. And he was like, yeah, he does. And we were like, we'll see how things go.
What does that mean? He
Uh,
looks cool.
I was just like, he looks like a cool dude. He looks chill. And then I tried to find your Instagram page to not find it, and was like, where is this guy? And I've never heard his name before. But yeah, so we were really excited. And it's been really cool to have an opportunity to get to know you. So that's been really great. So I want to like dial back in on like the God's will aspect of our life. I've found that a lot like especially this semester we've discussed this conversation. I know Nazario can talk about how much we've discussed this, but like it is a frequent part of our day where it's like if something, there's something that's a problem that happens, it's like, or just a challenge that we're facing or something we don't understand, it's like we're like, this is in God's will. Like we just got to figure out why he's trying to communicate with us. And so I guess leading up into, let's go to the conversion side here. Leading up into your conversion, how did you realize that it was God's will for you to, stick around with the Catholic faith, and like how did you know that was the direction you were meant to head, I guess?
Yeah. So a couple things. So I would argue that I grew up somewhat agnostic. Like I always believed like there was a God. Because like the beauty of creation. I love the outdoors. So I'm like, I just look at like the beauty of creation. I'm like, there's a complexity to it. There's a beauty and there's a goodness that I just recognize. And it's weird that I just like naturally recognize that. Also between like humanity, like between like my family, like on a level of just my family, like I love my family. I'm like, why is that so like intrinsically like ingrained in my heart? I'm like, that's a little weird. So I'm like, there's got to be something more than just like this. But I always felt like God was very distant. That kind of stemmed with certain relationships in my life, in my family and friendships, kind of keeping people at a distance. So I kind of kept God at his distance. Kind of fast tracking a little bit. Junior year of high school, I got in a really bad car accident. And obviously like leaving that, I was like, man, like I was literally like, no joke, like 4 inches away from dying. There was a post that went through the windshield, and I was like, what if like that would have happened that day? It's like, what would happen? And that really scared me, and like rightfully so, because I never like, thought, with like, the end in mind. I was always living my life about like, what can I do for myself like right now? That was like all my mentality in sports, in jobs, in relationships with people. It was all about me and what could I get out of it right now. So that kind of like really like flipped me on my head, for lack of better words, for that. So yeah, I kind of like left there and I was really scared. I was like, holy cow. I started asking more questions, talking to friends that I had. I always grew up like knowing about church. I would go to like different things, like with friends sometimes. I remember going to things as like a kid. And I was like, yeah, I don't need that. For some reason, like, it was whenever I got invited by a friend to go to Mass, I ended up leaving, like, once Mass got over with, I was like, I've been to, like, a couple different churches before. I'm like, I didn't know the deal. I was like, I've never been to a Catholic Mass. I was like, what was that? So I talked to the priest after. His name's Father Paul. And I was like, my only question is, like, what was that you were holding up? Like, like y'all call it, like, the Eucharist. Like, what is that? Because it kind of, like, dragged my attention. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, yeah, like, we believe, like, that's, like, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord, like, Jesus Christ. And I was like, what does that mean? I'm like, what does all that mean? And he's like, you should ask him. And I was like, okay. I was like, that kind of really annoyed me at the time. I was like, this is, like, such a...
All right, pal. You should ask him. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Like, this is an interesting, like, thing.
What a clown.
But, yeah, like, he told me, like, yeah, like, we have adoration times, so you should go. So I found an adoration time. I showed up in the chapel, and there's, like, this lady in there, and she's up at the front, this older woman, and she's praying on the kneeler. I was like, okay, like, that's probably like what I should do. So I'm like on the back right, which is where I still sit for Mass anyway. I'm a back row warrior. So yeah, I'm sitting there in the back row. I get down on the kneeler, and the prayer was something along the lines of, God, I know you're real, but I don't believe like you're personal. But, like, if you are real and if you are personal, like, I'm here. Like, I want to hear your voice. Long story short, a bunch of things came up in my heart from like previous experiences in my lives, like relationships, things that happened, trains that like, mentalities I had, things that came up like in my childhood that I like suppressed for so long that like, you know, I genuinely believe that like, you know, I encountered our Lord like in those wounds and like desiring to like, you know, redeem them. And I was just so touched. I left there and I was like, I don't know what just happened, but I want whatever's on that altar. I was like, I want that. So it started a train of like, you know, I was like, I want to go to RCIA at the time. You know, I want to learn more about the faith, but you know, as I like to say, curiosity converted the cat. So yeah, I did not leave RCIA, as y'all probably can figure out right now. I finished it out, came into full communion with the Catholic Church. So yeah, that's kind of my conversion story in a nutshell. So yeah, definitely beauty speaks to the heart, and it's a language that everybody speaks. So
it's funny. I was hanging out with some friends after Holy Thursday Mass, and one of them had brought a Protestant friend, and he was saying how Holy Thursday is not as prevalent of a celebration for Protestants as it is for Catholics. But that Good Friday is a big thing. There's always a service, but that Holy Thursday is pretty, you know, like low key. They might not. And he was like, but it's just so fascinating. Like the Catholics, it's just like I'm fascinated. Like I'm just like drawn in. Like it was such a cool mass. I'm like, that's called the Eucharist, bro. Like you're cooked. Like convert. 'Cause it's so over for you. And Dante, he was like, I was like, we love Holy Thursday because it's literally like the establishment of the Eucharist and the establishment of the priesthood and all this stuff. And like, you know, like, is that fascinating too? And he's like, yeah, it is fascinating. I was like, you just need to become Catholic. Like there's no if, ands, or buts about it. No buts about it. Before you start talking, I want to get I really want to dive into the quote. I like this quote a lot. I love that we're asking Thomas questions as well. I want to hear more, but I want to hear your first thoughts on the quote. You kind of went into it a little bit, and then I want to also toss it over to Nazario and get his first thoughts on this one. I have a feeling it's going to be an interesting take. But anyway, I'll toss it to you first. What draw you in about this quote? What drew you in?
yeah, so I think for me at least, like throughout my life, like once I you know, had that encounter like in adoration, I was like, okay, well then like what is God's will, you know, for my life? Like, you know, if I believe that him to be real, and I believe that, you know, he seeks me in relationship, like, well then like what does he want me to do? You know, I feel like that's a fairly logical, you know, conclusion. And I think God's will can be kind of over, like, I think some people can explain to be a little too complex, when in reality, like, you know, God speaks to me very clearly, and very like in simple terms. And like going back to the quote, about how like God's will is like actually like what like the present moment, like is for you in your life. And there's also like a caveat of like, you know, like you're pursuing like truth, beauty, and goodness. And you're like actively, you know, seeking like relationship with him. I feel like God speaks very clearly. So I don't think it's something to, you know, be rather like understood, but something like, you know, lived in and participated in. And that's how I know that like, you know, I'm doing like what God wants me to do. There's like an incredible sense of joy and peace in my heart. That doesn't mean there's not fear or like, you know, uncertainty or questions, you know, but rather like the joy and the peace actually like overshadows all that. So,
Yeah, I think you could have many, many long conversations about God's will, and you hear plenty of different mindsets around it, how to handle, you know, your view towards it, and all these different things. And recently, as Cole talked about, we've had conversations about it because of one of the guys in my Bible study, one of my disciples, Robert, has
Name drop. Dang.
Say it again.
Name drop. Dang.
Name
I
drop,
hope it's
yeah.
not something
Name
bad you're
dropped.
about to say.
No, this is really, really good. He brings it up in daily like dialogue more than basically anyone I've ever met. Like whole randomly, well not randomly, but something will be happening.
What is it?
What is
like
what?
God's will.
God's will?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
He will literally say God's will more than anyone. So whether it be something good happens, something bad happens, he'll say, you know, that's God's will. That's God's will.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a coping mechanism, and I'm not going to go into how Robert, you know, gets through his daily life, but it's brought up a different conversation and kind of a new time of thinking about God's will and how I think about it in my life. And I really like this quote in terms of how it says, well, all of it, I guess, but the part about not as I wish it to be, not as it might have been, but as it actually was at the moment. And I think of a conversation I was having with Cole yesterday, and he was getting a little stressed about something, and I was like, Cole, that thing hasn't even happened yet in your life, and you're already stressing about it.
Marriage.
And I was like, Cole, you don't even, like, this hasn't even happened yet at all, and yet you've been stressing about it. And so that's what I really like about this quote, is that it's talking about the moment, and that's what you can focus on. That's what you can realize, okay, God's will is right now. I don't know what it's going to be in the future. And in the past, I mean, this quote says, not as I wish it to be, which is a very, not as I wish it to be, not as it might have been. So it does a really good job of how do I rationalize or how do I come to understand God's will in the past of my life. Well, you also do that through coming to understand his will in the present moment. Like, why does he have you here in the present moment? So all of those things kind of work together to understand his will. And I want to go a little bit into who is this guy that wrote this book, because I think it matters a lot for the context around this. Does anyone else have any info on this guy that they were wanting to go into, or no? Okay, cool.
Are you about to explain?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. So
Carry
I only remember this because my mom was doing a devotion that I think was on Hollow or Ascension, I forget which app, about this book. And so this book comes from a priest, Walter Ciszek, is that how you say his name?
Yep.
He was a priest, and he went through in a very difficult priesthood. This guy was sent over into a very hostile part of the world, to the Soviet Union. I believe he was in Poland, which was occupied by the Soviet Union. And if you didn't know, communists and the Soviet Union didn't exactly like Catholic faith, religion in general. And they tried to stomp it out with everything that they could. I believe Walter was thrown into prison on multiple different occasions, tortured in some way, shape, or form. So this shapes you a lot. And actually, I'm reading a new book about JP2 that I didn't know that he was also a part of this at a time. He was in Poland during the Soviet Union as well. And he looks back on it and talks about his experience of, like, one, God protected him from a lot of priests that were killed during this time by the Soviet Union. Same thing with Father Ciszek, and that God had a purpose in that. And so I'm sure through going through this, he was able to come to understand how God's will works in a deeper way through suffering, which we talked about plenty, but through the good times as well, and how it ultimately leads to, I'm in this moment now, I can come to understand God's will of why he did that, and why that matters for me right now. So kind of some different context and different thoughts on it. Cole looks like he's going to take this. I'm going to throw it over to him, give him a quick second to get the mic.
Okay, so like the first thing that comes to my head when I was reading this and when it was given to us by Thomas, was the contrast between like what if and what is. Because I think a lot of the times we get so caught up in the if this, if then, whatever it is, if. It's like the future and we think ahead. Rather than what is actually present in front of us. It's like, take a situation where you have a puzzle board and there's a square, there's a circle, a diamond, a triangle, whatever it is, and you're given a square, but you're like, if this was only a circle, I could put it in the circle hole, right? But you have a square, so where are you going to put it? You're going to put it in the hole that actually works with the square. And so a quote that I want to bring up is, if we could give full satisfaction to the heart of God, we must bring our own will in everything into conformity with his. That is by St. Alphonsus Liguori. And the reason I bring that up is because there's so much beauty in uniting our will with the will of God and realizing and recognizing that it's so beneficial for us. You know, God acts in multiple ways. There's his permissive will and there's his active will. The things that are permitted by God and the things that are ordered by God. And what's up? Oh. And it's really beneficial when you sit there and actually pray and realize that God is just inviting you into things that are going to be fruitful for you. And what Nazaria's talking about in a lot of those different aspects kind of relates to just what my prayer life has been. And it's been like, okay, God, what are you calling me into right now? Where is the next step? If it's something that I'm resistant to, help me be less resistant. And I can only imagine, like for you, like especially going into the missionaryhood and the conversion, whatever it may be, you probably encountered resistance in that form. And I would say all of us would be very very wrong in our own sense if we didn't encounter it. Like, we have to encounter resistance in some way. We're all not saints or just Mary in the sense of like, okay, we have like this immediate like, oh, this is immediately we're going to conform to his will.
Well, Mary also had
A
resistance
little, yes.
and temptation. She was human,
Yeah,
so
she was
the
still
regular
human.
amount. Yeah.
But she also still set a great example for us in what that first
Yeah,
response
yeah.
should be, and it's "Thy will be done to me according to your word,"
Yeah.
which is a really good starting point. So how did you get that mindset originally? Like, and I know it's like I'm kind of trying to gauge the line between talking about the quote and explaining it, but like when did you first come to accept "Thy will be done unto me according to your word"? When did that change start with your mindset?
After enough fighting,
Woof.
honestly. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's first and foremost, I think, a grace of God, because genuinely, like, I feel like I'm pretty stubborn at times and very like, I want to do things like my way. It wasn't until like I got, like what I like wanted, and then I'm like, wait a second, like it's cool, but it's not like now I'm still wanting more. It's like, okay, like it's not funny anymore.
In terms of what?
Like career wise. So
Okay.
senior year, career's a big question. You don't go to school with no plan, or if you do, then
Some
like,
of us do.
you got time to figure it out. But so there's still hope. But yeah, I mean, you don't go to college for no reason. I mean, you go like for a goal, like you have a goal in mind. And like I went obviously to study, like a certain thing and like get a good job and like be able to provide for myself and for my family. So like whenever I got, like I love, the company I worked for, like I love the people. I went to Bible study with my boss. Like, I mean, great, incredible people. I got like what I wanted in a sense, like what I prayed for. It kind of like fell into my lap, like I was going to wash dishes and do yard work going into senior year, got a phone call and like somehow landed, this year-long gig with these great people. Yeah. And like, I got it and I was like, all right, like, like it's what I want, but I'm not growing and being the man that I know God is calling me to be. So like that really wrestled internally in my heart. And I was like, okay, like, so like, Lord, like, what do you want me to do? And like that's whenever like, I was like, you know what, like I'm done, like trying to like really get what I want. I'm like, I just want to like, Lord, let me be receptive to like just what happens. And like what happened is like, I started my Bible study back up, more, I met a bunch of like, freshman and sophomore guys at Georgia, invited them to my Bible study, and for some reason they kept showing up every week. It's like, it's like for some reason, like these things start to happen, it's like interview weekend comes up. It's like, I'm like, a random thought is like, well, I can't discern it if I don't apply. It's like random things that just happen. So I'm like, you know what, like, Lord, like I'll give it a shot. I think it's just a grace of God from like, me being stubborn and like experiencing like, okay, like, I got what I wanted, but it's not like, what I really want.
Mhm.
So I'm like, not like, what do I want? Now it's like, okay, well then, Lord, like show me then,
So I'm gonna reach back about 20 minutes ago, and I'm also gonna set you off on a quest. And we're 30 something minutes in, and this is shocking to me. Accept is the word I'm picking to define. So there you go. Have at that. But I want to go way back, Thomas, to something you said when you were like saying your first points. You said, we try to make God's will so complex. And I'm just going to put you on the spot because I agree with this, right? I think that like when saints and when we talk about like you get down to the core of God's will, it's simple. But for us, and we're like, oh, God's will, like God's like obviously God, right? His will has to be complex, right? But that's wrong. So speak to that a little bit. And kind of say what you meant by that, right?
Yeah. So obviously I don't know like the entirety of like
Don't worry, we have a heresy button.
Yeah,
God-
we do have a heresy
God's
check.
will,
Just
you
say
know what I
heresy
mean?
check.
but I speak in the lens of like discernment. So like where like, in my own life, I can like try to overanalyze everything and like, think everything is like this, like, like magical sign or what's going on. And it's like, no, like in reality, like, like the things that are, presented before me for a decision. So like going to the discernment side, right? So like senior year, I had focus and I had 2 other job offers. So like realistically, those are my options. You know, it's not like a million different, like I could do a million different things, but these things are the most pressing. These are the things that are coming up in prayer. These are what's weighing on my heart. These are like the options presented before me. And like, you know, taking that to prayer, I'm like, Lord, like, what is it that you want me to do? And like what kept coming up was the joy of the possibility of being a missionary. So I'm like, in that sense, you know, like God's will for me in choosing to answer the call is like, okay, like that's fairly simple. Now it's not simple fighting the fears that I had in my heart and the perceptions of people that they had of like, you know, like, oh, well, like, you know, like, what are you doing? Like, you know, like this isn't like a typical thing that you do post grad or whatever it is. You know, and like also like not everything needs to like, you know, like be discerned. You know, like I don't need to really discern like what I'm going to eat for like lunch or like what I ate before the podcast. You know, like I don't need to spend a lot of time, you know, figuring that out. You know, like there's times of discernment, you know, and it's like giving those, you know, like the right attention and not worrying too much, you know, because if you truly believe, you know, like your Father in heaven, like, you know, feeds the birds and makes sure they like they don't sow nor reap. You know, it's like if I truly believe like God has my best interest in mind, like, you know, I just have to be aware of what's going on around me. So does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I think it's easy to mix up making a decision and discerning,
Yeah.
right? Like at some point you have to pick.
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
Like you had to discern, like, you know, like discerning vocations. Like that is obviously something where you want to seek counsel, seek guidance. You need to make judgments. That's a very serious discernment. Same thing like post-grad. Like, what am I going to do post-grad? Like that could change a lot in your life, like where you are and like what you do with most of your time and energy. So it's like, you know, these are big like moments of discernment, but also like, you know, for the most part, like, you know, I mean, if it's true and good and like, you know, like I'm like interested in it and I'm like, you know, like, Lord, if this isn't your will, like, you know, like remove it as an option, you know. You know, if you don't want me leading a Bible study, then like why is it that like I want to lead one? Like I really enjoy, you know, the relationships I have with the guys in Bible study. Why is it that like, you know, it's like if this truly isn't your will, then like, you know, remove it. You know, so yeah, there's definitely a difference.
Yeah, I really want to like chime in on this because I think it's so cool. We had an episode, maybe 4 episodes, where we talked about desire, and you know, I said that it was like God's way of communicating with us, and that's in our daily life. Like everything that happens to us is a prayer. Our life is art. Going back to beauty, beauty is a form of like seeing that desire and actively being able to recognize it. It's cool, right? God communicates with us through our surroundings and our body and whatever it may be, and like going back again to the square circle thing. Like if you're trying to make a square fit into a circle, it's not going to click and you won't see what God's actively doing. But when you actually put the circle where it's supposed to be, you actually reap the rewards. You see what happens with the machine that you're putting it into, and it's like, oh, it starts to move. Now it may not be what you were originally desiring, but God's calling you to something else, and there's a reason that there's that stirring, that like you're struck by that. It's the same thing with like a painting or a piece of art or seeing the Eucharist in Mass. You were struck by the Eucharist. There's something that struck you. It's just like, and I'm weirded out why. And it caused that curiosity. It caused that thing. And that's God moving in your life. And I want to throw this to you right now because I also think Nazario this semester has had a lot of stirring with his major, with his job, because I get these messages on like a monthly basis where Nazario, not monthly basis, last like for 2 months each semester, this semester, Nazario has refined what he wants to do with his future. And a lot of it, I believe, truly has come with your prayer life. And it's been really cool for me seeing his discernment, because I think it's been a really good example for me in how to lead that in my own career. And so I know you can go into this, but I wanted to intro you just to prepare you for what's to come. So I don't know what you're going to say, but I expect there to be
Was there
something.
a question in there?
No, I'm just
Okay.
letting him speak.
I thought I missed something.
I'm letting him speak on my statement, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I didn't know I was going to talk about this today, so bear with me as I attempt to answer. Well, he didn't ask me a question as
Yes,
I
his
nail
statement.
him with my microphone.
Yeah.
But this semester, for some reason, my final semester, I ended up having a biology class and a physiological psychology class, which is just biology. I don't know why they call it that, to be honest, guys. It's just a higher level biology class. But they're all in the same semester. And originally, I thought, like, I had applied for all my grad schools and I had put a ton of effort into. This is going to be way longer than
Yeah,
anything
just
ever. Holy
short,
cow!
just short.
How
just
in the
short,
world am I?
short and
Okay,
sweet.
so I applied for grad school. Thought I was going to go to some place. That place didn't end up working out, and then I ended up finding a different place. So I had to go through that, the whole thing of which place I was supposed to go to, trying to figure that all out. But then also at the time, like I brought up the classes for a reason, is kind of seeing this desire and this interest in human anatomy and like physiology, and wondering like why am I interested in this? I thought I didn't like science. I thought I was all about wanting to focus on mental health and the brain and helping people through that. So that was a whole discernment period. And so I was trying for like a while, which is probably the text Cole's talking about, is trying to figure out how do I incorporate all of this together. Like I thought I was just going to do this mental thing. Why am I interested in now the physiological side? And through it all, obviously God the whole time was like, I wouldn't give you this without having a plan already in place for this. And that's going on along with like, obviously I have a girlfriend that I want to marry here in the future. Shocker. But
She already knows that.
Yeah.
So it's fine if it's on the podcast.
so that's along with it. Like, as some of you may know, like we've been doing long distance. I don't want to continue doing that. That's not super fun. So trying to figure out all of this at the same time. Of course, we have a lot of thoughts in our brains. So there's so many different things going on, trying to figure it all out. And so along the way, there's plenty of ideas that I thought of and that I would communicate with Cole. Like, I don't know where this is going at all. So, but the main point is you could have so many different thoughts in your brains, or in your brain. You have one brain, and so many different ideas. But at the end of the day, if he's going to give you the desires, and if he's going to give you the passions and the gifts, he has a plan for them to work out in his will. And so you you kind of have to be open to it, understand that it may not make sense in this moment, but with that, you have to understand that his will is this moment, and that it's okay to be confused and not understand. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of times in all of our lives where we had no idea what we were going to do, and slowly it worked out. Or for some of us, it may still be working out, including myself, and that's okay. So, Cole, I want you to give an answer real quick. Was that what you were looking for?
Yes, exactly what I was looking for. And previously, Evan asked me to define a word, and I'm gonna let him define
So-
the word and close with that because it's a good spot.
This is perfect, and then we'll go to PPP. I always get that wrong, so I'm happy I got
right?
I got that.
Bang.
I got that right this week. But so I asked earlier about accept, and the reason I asked this is because Father Wyman on Sunday, Easter Vigil, technically Saturday, was talking about how his first priestly assignment, he was kind of upset about it. He really didn't want to do it. He didn't like it, but he did it, right? He's obviously still in the priesthood, like he did it, which at that point you're cooked, buddy. You're already ordained. There's, you can't really do it. But accept is a verb meaning to receive something offered willingly, consent to terms, believe something as true, or endure a situation. And the reason I bring this up is because oftentimes when we talk about God's will, we're very much of the opinion like, oh, I always have to be happy about like what God has planned for my life, which there's some truth to, right? You should be happy. Like God's will, he gives you desires so that, your desires align with his will, right? So yes, there should be a certain portion of you that's happy, but biblically, we look at plenty of people that God called them to things that they didn't exactly want to do or enjoy doing. I mean, one of the most famous is Jonah. We talk about Jonah getting sent to Nineveh. But I like this quote a lot because he says, I had continuously to learn to accept God's will. That doesn't mean that he always was happy, right? You talk about imprisonment and being in the Soviet Union and being obviously in an unfriendly place to him. Like, I'm sure that there was times when he wasn't happy that he had said yes to God's will, right? But he accepted it, right? He continued with it. And I think that's crucial because without that, we are, forging our own path, right? We're fumbling around in the dark, as it were. And so one of the most crucial points that any of these people we can talk about, how do we, we've talked so much about how do we discern God's will, how do we obey it, what do we do? But one of the most basic theories that we can use to find out what God's will is in our PPP.
Ladies and gentlemen, the practical prayer practice of the week.
So, as per usual, just so you know, this is pretty typical that we walk in to the podcast and we go, so anybody have a PPP? So nothing new this week of Thomas Case bringing us the quote, and then all of us.
Hold on, we haven't done this in a while, but talk about the practical prayer practice from a previous week and how that went. I just
Oh.
want to make a quick
Yeah.
mention here of Cole's practical prayer practice that he brought from his mother 2 weeks ago about if someone pops up into your mind to call them. So I don't know if y'all have done this, but here we go. I did this a couple times last week, and one of the coolest parts I think is hearing the joy from the other person and receiving that call. So if anyone out there had a good phone call from the practical prayer practice from 2 weeks ago, shout out. But I actually don't remember what our practical prayer practice was at all last week, Evan. I'm sorry about that. But
it was Eastering joyfully, which
Eastering
I definitely
joyfully.
Easter joyfully.
Yeah, for
I don't
sure,
know
for
about
sure.
y'all, but
So, but yeah, quick throwback to talking about the practical prayer practice
Anyway.
from previous weeks.
yeah, thanks.
It was funny because I did do this, and I originally wasn't going to call this person, but my mom called me out and told me that I'm a podcast member and I should listen to the practical prayer practice that she recommended.
Was
Was
it
I
your
was with her.
mom?
No, it wasn't my mom.
Was it an ex-girlfriend?
No, it was literally my ex-boss actually.
Oh.
So that was cool.
That's
And
not that
I had to put stuff on my internship, like background screening.
Yeah.
And I have like all of his information, but my mom was like, you should call him, like your practical
Mhm,
prayer practice
mhm,
for the week is
mhm.
this. And I was like, okay. And I called him and we had like a 30-minute conversation. It was so great to hear his voice. It had been literally 3 years, and he's just a redneck out of South Alabama. So
Wow.
it's awesome. And you love
Wow.
that. And I love my boss. He was incredible. So we got to share some old time stories, and it was a lot of fun. But anyways, back
Anyway,
to the
all
real
that to
time
say, we
quote.
did not prepare, and Thomas Case brought up a wonderful practical prayer practice that is probably the most practical prayer practice that has ever been practiced on the Lost Sheep podcast. So,
I'll preface this. Whenever I heard practical prayer practice, I thought like long term. So I do have a weekly one. If that's
there we go.
If
There
that's
we
what y'all
go.
want.
Do you
But
understand?
The long-term
Do you
one
understand
still,
now?
the long-term one still applies. Yeah. So
Say both.
Yeah,
then.
go
I
for
would
it.
say just
Yeah,
say
go
both.
for it.
Go for both.
yeah. So I'll do both, but I'll start with the short one first. So as far as like a weekly practical prayer practice, I think starting and ending your days in prayer, and by prayer, I mean on your knees, at night, and on your knees in the morning, thanking God for your life, for the gift of another day, and for the gifts of the things that happen that day, whether they be joy, suffering, uncertainty, maybe clarity, thanking Him for everything that happened to you this day and how it works, towards the end of you being with Him, and then also for the end of others, for to bring people closer to Christ. So I would say that's a practical one this week, is praying, morning and night, and thanking God for the things that have happened. More long term, like I said when I first walked in here, which now I'm realizing it's not a practical prayer practice. This is more of a prayer practice. But yeah, 10 minutes a day, every day for the rest of your life. Mark it up as a challenge. But it's not like one to be like a box to check off, but rather like a way of life. I think that's what prayer ought to be, is a way of life more than just a box you check of things that like you do. It's not like going to the gym every day, or it's not like, yep, I did my homework. It's like, nope. It's like, prayer is like we have to like live as we
I don't know
pray.
about you, but the gym is 100% a way of life.
Well, yeah. But I'm just saying, like, not
This guy
confuse-
sounds tiny.
Yeah. Somebody just doesn't go. I can feel called out now. No, but yeah, it's not to be confused with like a checklist item, doing the dishes like everybody does here,
Yeah.
for the roommates. But it's like a way of life. So I heard that first in my interview, actually, with one of the missionaries. I asked him, what's one of the biggest thing he's learned, as he converted, or as he reverted rather. And he told me of a time of, advice that a priest gave him, and this was after a confession, and he's like, Father, like, like what's some practical advice, like, like I don't know, like what I'm doing, and he's like, like you should pray every day, 10 minutes for the rest of your life, like every day, like he's like, it's really simple. And he still does it to this day. And that kind of stuck with me because of the simplicity of, the invitation to holiness, but also like the, capability, that we all have of being
Yeah.
saints. Saints, it's not like this like far off, thing to be grasped at, but something to be done unto us. And it's fairly simple. It's gifting our heart to God every day, slowly but surely.
It's kind of like a multiple choice test, when the professor's like, don't just simply memorize the answers. Instead, like, it should be a gut intuition that, like, okay, I know this is what it is. Like prayer should be. It shouldn't be simply like, I'm going to check this off because I've memorized that this is the right thing to do. It's like, this is part of my nature. It's part of my human nature. It's my relationship with Christ.
Mhm.
So I relate to that a lot. I get that a lot. But anyways,
Well, hold on, real fast. One thing I like everything y'all are saying. Oh, the one thing I'll say is Mother Teresa has a famous quote that says, "Pray 10 minutes or pray whatever minutes, and if you don't have time to do that, do 20." Which just shows how fundamental prayer is. But I will also encourage like people who don't have, if you don't pray 5 minutes a day, if you don't pray 10 minutes a day, you don't have a daily prayer life. Like, it's easy to read that don't have this as a checklist item and think like, oh, I should just like spontaneously pray. That's not what we mean, right? Like, it's still important that you're building this habit, right? That you're using like tactile methods to build this habit, whether that's like a sticker chart or something, right? Because it's hard to build a habit that you don't have without, building it. And so when we say don't make this a checklist item, it's not like something that I'm required to do and I start to begrudge it and then it becomes like just a thing in my life that has no passion or love or feeling behind it. Rather, what we mean is make it something that you want to do each day and that becomes a part of your life that's so ingrained with how you live your life that you don't think about it as, oh, I have to pray today. Like, I'm required to, and it's a burden.
That's a need ever have, Develop it where you need it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, you're in a struggle. So I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. And hopefully you can develop that in your life. And if you can do 10 minutes a day, you'll be in a good spot.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Shepherd of the Week.
So following the practical prayer practice, we move on to the Shepherd of the Week, which has been brought to us by the wonderful Thomas Case. Thomas, you can intro, talk about whatever you want to talk about your Shepherd of the Week.
Yeah. So the Shepherd of the Week is Bishop Robert Barron. I picked him for a specific reason. Because y'all have a podcast. And one thing I've actually been really I think it's really cool. The church as a whole is, we just had St. Carlo Acutis, canonization over the summer. I think it's so cool to see us take advantage of the platform of the internet, to use it as a tool of evangelization, as a tool of, teaching the faith, of catechesis and in general of reaching people. So that's why I picked Bishop Robert Barron, because of his Word on Fire series. He's on a bunch of podcasts. He's everywhere, or at least he's always on my YouTube whenever I load it up. I think the work that he does with Word on Fire, and the people that he's able to reach, I think is something that we ought to look up to as a church, as far as the platform that you can build. Because there's a lot of bad things on the internet, but also it's a space that we can overrun with holy and good things. And I think it's something that you guys are doing right now, with the podcast, and with your social media and all these things going on, is this is a platform that we can use to bring people to Christ. I think of the work that Bama Catholic does with posting events, reaching out to people, letting people know mass times, events going on at the parish. That is crucial. Now, because like there are a bunch of voices on social media grabbing for people's attention. Why not the Catholic Church? You know, so that's why I picked him as the Shepherd of the Week, and he's kind of a hero of mine. Intellectually, I think he explains the faith beautifully. He speaks so much on the beauty and like the art, you know, of the Christian life. So
Yeah, and to bring it back to the quote, to remember God's will at this moment. We are in this moment. So we are in the era of the internet, and more importantly, really, we are in the era of AI, which Pope Leo actually talked about this in one of his first talks, like about he's in this era. That's kind of his call, is to figure out how to live in this. And that brings me to the Bible verse. You are in this world, but not of this world. So you got to live in it. You got to understand it. One, to be able to relate to the people that you're trying to evangelize and just the people in general that you're trying to live life with. And then also, like as Thomas said, it's a tool. Whether it be the internet, whether it be podcasts, whether it be AI, just understand the tools. And shout out Catholic AI, Magisterium AI, Truthly AI, 2 AIs created by Catholics. So if you don't have a human Catholic resource and you need a quick answer, you know, you can go do that. A little free shout out for them. But yeah, Evan, you got anything to say?
Not really. I was just gonna say Bishop Barron only has 72 episodes on his podcast, so you know.
Oh, so he's kind
But
of weak.
he also has
kidding,
a
just
guest
kidding.
every week, and guys like Christopher West and Gregory Pine. So we
Well,
have
do they have
we have Thomas
Case?
Case.
we
So-
love supporting small content creators.
But with that, we are going to go into our final thoughts here on the quote. I'm going to shift it over to Cole.
Well, I was actually going to say one more thing on Bishop Barron. He's actually a very personal guy from what I've been told. A priest friend of mine who was at a big event in the Vatican actually ran into him, and they were grilling steaks with the other priests. And he asked him if he wanted to come, fully expecting a no. And he was like, oh, I'll stop by. And they were sitting there having steaks, and they're like in the middle of the party. And Bishop Barron walks in, and he was like, I had like a 2-hour conversation with him. He's like so real. So that was cool. Kind of also just to like see the reality of like Catholic influencers still being humans. David Calavita, for instance, is one of the guys that we just got to meet, and he's a pretty decent sized Catholic influencer. And getting just to have a like simple 30-minute conversation with him was so neat. It was like they are our equals, and it's just weird to see that, you know, because you see them and you put them on his pedestal, but they're still human, and it's so cool seeing that, especially with the priest or bishop in Robert Barron's instance. So that was definitely neat. But final thoughts on the quote. I want to go back to the accepting part. I think that's the best and most important part to grasp from this quote, because there's so many different areas in our lives where we're called into something that God is calling us into something, and we feel that resistance, we feel the pull to something else, and learning to accept God's will is just so beneficial. It's so fruitful, and I think you'll find more peace in that, even if it's not something that you want. God will show you why he did it. And so, yeah, I think this practical prayer practice is going to be really beneficial. We talked something about this like 2 weeks ago with discerning God's will, and it was like the simple reality. Prayer's the way to go. It's the best way. So I invite you all to pray in your 10 minutes of prayer, to pray with the word accept. To see where your heart is with that. I told Nazario a couple weeks ago, I was like, it had been a hot minute in my prayer where I first started my prayer and be like, God, let it be done unto me according to your word. Like, whatever you want from me, I'm here. I'm open. I'm willing to listen. And I hadn't opened prayer like that in a long time, not because I didn't want to, but I also kind of just forgot about it. So this was a great reminder to do that. So I encourage you in those 10 minutes, like, use Mary's example, set it up, and start with that. But yeah, what about you, Evan? Bear?
I said most of everything. I got nothing to leave y'all with.
All right, Thomas.
Yeah, I do want to say one thing. Yeah, there are a lot of hopes and like dreams, you know, that you do have, and God wants to woo you. He wants to amaze you and do a lot of things in your life. But that really starts when you start to accept like what's happening right now. You know, there's a lot of reality of like, you know, like I could literally be doing anything. Like, you know, like we have free will. Like let's not act like we don't have that. You know, but peace and joy, you know, and like the love that God wants to love me with, like I won't be able to, you know, accept that if I'm not like, you know, doing what I'm called to do right now. We all have a call to holiness. Like you guys have a call to be, you know, a student. You know, it's like that's what you're here for. That's like what you're primarily here for. You're also called to be a missionary, by virtue of your baptism. So it's like fulfilling these like basic fundamental calls. It's like you really start to, live the good life, as St. Francis de Sales would put it. So yeah.
Yeah. So, sorry, lacking words right there.
Wow.
But we just want to say thank you to Thomas Case for coming on this episode. Give a quick round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to comment, tell us what you thought of Mr. Case. Go follow him over. Do you have an Instagram, right?
I do not have any socials except for like YouTube, but like
Go
I just use it just to watch
follow
my YouTube.
Focus Bama.
Yeah, follow Focus Bama. Yeah.
Shout out Focus Bama. Shout out
Bro.
Focus.
Either way.
Yeah, but we appreciate Thomas being on the episode. He is our second Focus missionary that we've had on the pod.
And you can also check out his information on the if you go to Focus Catholic, there's a find a missionary tab. You can read more about Thomas and connect with him if you have questions.
Phone
His
number,
email, and phone
it's
number
there.
on
I
there.
got a
So
short little story about like
Yeah.
what's going on, but
you gonna get random calls now, huh?
maybe. I mean, I already do. I already get like random calls, so it's okay. But yeah, thank y'all for having me. It's such a blessing to be on here with y'all.
Of course, we love your insight. We thank you for all that you've done for us as our missionary. Thank you for bringing the stuff for the podcast. For our audience out there, we hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Also, check out the merch. Don't forget we have wristbands and T-shirts. Yeah. So this has been episode number 85. I officially looked it up. This is episode 85 of the Lost Sheep Podcast. Thank y'all for tuning in. We'll see you next week. God bless.